Said like a
Nick,
pro. Love it.
I'm getting used to it. There's a guy that can hook me up with these things, I hear. But
Yeah, no, I
in
feel
all
you, man.
seriousness, yeah, Nick, thanks for joining us. So
Yeah.
looking forward to Texas being part of this. In fact, we got some premature baseball overlap this weekend as we do this out in Houston. Texas
Yep.
will be playing in the Houston Astros College Classic. Vanderbilt LSU will also be in that, but we're not talking baseball today. We're talking football.
We are.
And my
Yeah.
goodness, it has been a whirlwind.
Well, thanks for having us on Horns Up Talkin Texas podcast. Nick Kreider, Joshua Fisher, Alex Tasspolous, the Rock Tasspolous. Happy to be here, Chris. Yeah, we're super excited. You know, as Longhorns, like couldn't have gone much better of a season besides maybe beating Washington and making it to the Natty. But at the end of the day, great building block. I think exceeding expectations. You know, returning a lot of players. It's always nice when you're returning a lot of players, but also seeing a lot of guys going in the draft as well. I mean, we have, I think, over 13 players in the combine. Maybe 13 is the number, but essentially, you know, we're going to have a bunch of guys drafted, and that was not something that happened, you know, when we were in college. Mind you, there was actually years that no Texas Longhorns got drafted whatsoever. So it's complete turnaround that Sark has been able to do. You know, Quinn Ewers tied for Heisman favorite odds right now with Carson Beck, which is something that's super exciting. Returning 4 of our starting 5 offensive linemen, which is great. The weakest link is honestly the one that's leaving in Christian Jones. The rest are young, big boys, and they're hungry. So yeah, things are looking up, but excited to talk about these Horns.
I want to ask each of you. I'll start. I'll tell you what. We'll let John do it, and then we'll go kind of clockwise from here. But I want y'all's opinions. I mean, the last 2.5 years of Texas football. Let's just rewind. We're all sitting there. I remember I'm at the beach in Florida, and this bomb just gets dropped that Texas has joined the league. Since then, Texas goes, 6 months ago now, beats Alabama in a place where nobody beats Alabama, gets to the playoff. Didn't go as well for Texas as I thought it would, but all things considered, pretty good year.
Yep.
John, just starting with you, just the last 2.5 years of this with Texas football, what's the ride been like? How do you think perception has changed?
It's Josh, by the way. I don't want to correct you on the show, but it's a good shout out to my dad. This is
what happens when you can't read your screen.
No, it's fine.
It's so his father. He gets that a lot.
Yeah, John's my dad, so it's so cool, and he'll definitely be listening in. He doesn't miss a show, so he'll take it as a shout out, Chris. So he'll appreciate that, my man. He won't appreciate you wearing the Braves hat, though. He's a Mets guy. I mean, it's all pretty amazing, you know. And yeah, you said like the game didn't go, and Nick said it too, the game didn't go the way we wanted to in the Sugar Bowl. And obviously, you know, you want to end up with a victory. And the fact that we're even in it at the end with an A.D. Mitchell jump ball, one of the guys who Nick mentioned in that, like, whatever 13 amount of guys that we have at the combine, a guy that's being talked to by the Buffalo Bills the back end of the first round, which for us,
Chiefs,
echoing Nick, is crazy to think we have a receiver in that realm. I mean, it was crazy to hear at first the news, but now it all just makes sense. You know, all this, us going to the SEC, it's just, I'm almost a little upset it didn't happen in the basketball season, right? Because now we have to play Houston, Kansas, and Baylor and all these teams that are just like gauntlets on both sides of the court. I would have loved to head to the SEC when it's just a free for all and everyone could score 90 points. And then it's borderline. It's ironic because we call the SEC football NFL light. Now the basketball is almost NBA light because there's no defense in the SEC basketball, at least with Kentucky and Bama when we watch them. But the news is amazing. Sark's really got this thing on the right track. And I couldn't be more excited to go and compete with the best teams in football, and the fact that Georgia is coming into our house is exciting. Carson Beck is the tie with the Heisman favorite. The fact that they're coming in and he's the guy, and he, let's not sugarcoat it. He was amazing. And I think he was kind of underserved in the media last year. And he's a really phenomenal football player and definitely turned it up in the second half. And they're not going to be an easy out coming into our house. I think it's really exciting to get to go against the best. And I think we proved that Alabama game was not a fluke. We went in there, we played our brand of football. We showed our brand of football the rest of the year outside the OU game, which, you could liken that game, and we do on our show, to Alabama-Auburn when people were like, oh, Alabama barely escaped a mediocre Auburn team. But that game's different. The Iron Bowl is different. right? The Red River game is different. There are certain rivalries in college football, right? When you hit them, and I know Michigan and Ohio State have been at the top of the mountaintop over the last, I don't know how long, right? Probably almost last decade. But even that game is different, right? There's just a different air in those games. So outside the OU game, we pretty much played our brand of football, dealing with injuries throughout the entire season. And that starts from the top down with Sark. Look at all the coaches he retained. All like Tashard Choice can get a good job somewhere else.
Yeah,
There's no doubt.
He turned down the Rams running back position 2 years ago.
Turned down the NFL to stay with us. There are guys that are coming into this building, that are staying in this building, that believe that we can win a national championship under Coach Sarkisian, that we can win a national championship with Quinn Ewers under center. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the three of us and speak for the three of us and our co-host Quan Cosby, that we all believe it too this upcoming season, despite joining the SEC. And Alex and I said in another program, maybe last week, when we were talking, we have one of the easier SEC schedules, and there's no denying that, as easy as it can be, right? So you have to feel really good about where Sark's got us, with even though the crazy news, it just now seems so natural that we go there, and you got to feel really great.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add on to that is, you mentioned, Chris, we found out about this news 2 years ago, right? Not going into last season. And the Texas of old, at least Texas in the last 10 years, we would have gotten distracted by that. But I love that we took care of business and wanted to make a lasting stand with our last year in the Big 12 and win that conference. And at the beginning of the season, what Steve Sarkisian was kind of preaching to the guys on the team was, we're going to embrace the hate and we're going to win. And we're going to make this Big 12 commissioner pissed off. And that's what it ended up being. And that mental fortitude gives me a lot of confidence going into this year. You mentioned Bet Online, one of the partners of the show at the top. Texas they're minus money to get to the college football playoff now, 12-team playoff. They're the second shortest odds to win the conference that they've newly joined, just behind Georgia, who's plus 200 and Texas is plus 250. So I'm excited to cement ourselves as the true UT in the conference. I mean, it's something that you mentioned prior to us hopping on. Whenever someone, you meet someone from the Southeast and you say, oh, I go to UT, they go, oh, Tennessee. Or, if they're a Louisiana person, they might say Texas, right? Just because of the proximity. And it never has really bothered me. But now, this is going to be a true debate in basketball and in football and in baseball. Who's the true UT
with
in
Rick
the Southeastern
Barnes
Conference?
Too?
Yeah. And the shared history with Rick on the basketball side. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. It's obviously not one of Texas's big rivals heading to the SEC. It's going to be Arkansas. It's going to be A&M. It's going to be Alabama. It's going to be LSU and Georgia. I think are going to be kind of the perennial rivalries, so to speak. But new rivalries will form, right? Mizzou, I guess, as well, just because they were in the Big 12 prior. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think we're in as good of a position as you could be. I mean, you compare Washington, who's going from the Pac to the Big 10, and they just lost their head coach, right? We have a lot more continuity. And you got to feel good about that if you're a Longhorn fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, I want your perspective on that too, because and is there something there that maybe, look, I've followed the SEC for decades, and so we're getting a different perspective on Texas joining the league, but it just seemed like it's been a thrill ride in Austin ever since that announcement's been made. What are the things that maybe you guys would think about from a Texas perspective that those of us who've followed the SEC without Texas wouldn't be thinking about?
Oh, man. I mean, there's just so many things that I feel like we are bringing to the table, but also at the same time are excited for us to, add to our, I guess, embarrassment of riches that we have in Austin. I don't think that we are, I know we're ready, but when it comes to the type of atmospheres at away games, you can't tell me that going to Iowa State or going to Kansas or going even to, even West Virginia, is the same as going down to the Grove, going down to Death Valley, going down to Tuscaloosa. That's just something that, is new and foreign territory for all of us. And you're going to see a lot of Longhorn fans traveling really well to those games because it's a bucket list. I feel like in college, like we knew buddies that would just go to an LSU or an Ole Miss game just to go to it. Not even if Texas was in it, but because they were itching to get that type of atmosphere that you couldn't necessarily get in the Big 12. Mind you, DKR in Austin has changed quite a bit. And I think when Texas was a less exciting team when we were in school, and a couple years prior to that, and maybe a couple years even after that, wasn't as electric as an atmosphere as it is these days. I think the athletic director and the university has done a really great job trying to get the energy back in that stadium. For a while, we were really one of those universities that had a strong outside fan base, but when it came to people in the game, there was a bunch of there still are, but a lot of season ticket holders that refuse to stand up, that just want to sit in their seats, that don't want to get super rowdy and loud. And I think there's just like a new surge of energy that's come through the building with the renovations that have come to DKR, but also with the team being so good, with Sark, with all these new players. That is something that is much needed heading into the SEC. And, I think one of the things that resonated with me a lot, the first Bama game that was in Austin when Texas ultimately lost by a point, close game. Bryce Young had an amazing game, but Will Anderson came out and said that was like the greatest atmosphere that he's played in his college years. And that really resonated with us because at the end of the day, it's like he is used to going to LSU. He is used to going down to Auburn. He's used to going down to Georgia. Like these are big time atmospheres. And so I think we're right there now, toe to toe. And I think you're going to see a lot of these Texas fans bring it even more now that they're in the SEC. And I'm sure we have a target on our back with every school that comes in, and I'm sure OU does too. But we're looking the opposite direction, putting a target on everyone else's back. It's the first matchup in the SEC that we have with Arkansas, since they beat us. It's the first matchup we've got coming up with Georgia. Like at the end of the day, like we're super excited, licking our chops for this, and we're welcoming, every single opportunity that comes our way. But not even just football, though. I think with basketball, it's something that we could talk about at a later time. And, our Horns have been up and down roller coaster season this year, trying to fight to get into the playoff, but or the tournament. But at the end of the day, like Big 12 has always been a great basketball conference, and it's exciting that the SEC is also starting to really, get some love, and as they should, as a premier basketball conference that we're itching to get into.
Yeah, and the SEC is not the Big 12, but it's closed the gap between the SEC and the Big 12 the last couple of years. And I mean, Texas just brings a little something. I was watching, Josh, something you said, I don't remember the exact comment, but I was watching Texas Tech the other night. We had the near brawl and the minutes of chance. There just seems like there's a little bit of edge when Texas is in the building. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I mean, like Nick said, the target on our backs. It's always on our backs. What happens? Like, look, man, if you're the New York Yankees and you go to play in Seattle, like the ticket prices go up. Everyone wants to see them, kick the crap out of the Yankees. And that stems from they'll always find a point. The early 2000s, this and that. Like that's Texas, man. We are the biggest brand in college sports, and not just on us being homers, just a fact. But I love what Nick said about putting target on other people's backs too. Like we have to get revenge against Arkansas. Last time we went into Arkansas, we got our crap kicked out of us, right? Yeah. So we have to go and get revenge there. We have to put the target back on. We have to put the target on Georgia's back. They're the top dog in our eyes to beat. Still with Bama, I know we beat them at their place last year, but they were the SEC champs last year, and they went to the college football playoff and they almost took down the Michigan Wolverines, who won the whole thing. Like we have to go put targets on people's backs. Ole Miss has had success in recent years, and they had an amazing transfer portal class. Tennessee has had really strong success. Yeah. They also beat Alabama at home in a reckless game. Like what Mizzou has, Mizzou could sneak into the playoffs, right? Like there's a lot of talent in the SEC across. I'm looking at the flags behind you, and then Chris, and I'm just listing off these teams, and every team I'm looking at is like a team that's coming ready to collect. Like Hugh Freeze is. The fact that Hugh Freeze is back at Auburn or like back in the SEC with Auburn is crazy. Like no one's even like that's kind of almost under the rug at this point with all the news and craziness that goes on in the SEC. I do want to say something though. Yes, the energy kicked up a notch with us going to the SEC. Yes, that was exciting. I really think the energy kicked up a notch coincidentally in Sark's second year. when Sark kind of
Yeah.
flopped record-wise his first year and then came back stronger in his second year and had that game where we're like, we almost beat Bama. It's like that Rocky 1. It's like Rocky 1 and Rocky 2. Like, all right, like Rocky 1, he almost gets it done. Rocky 2, he comes back and he defeats him. Like, and they want the smoke and he comes back and he does it. And now he's the champ, right? And I mean, I know we have ways to go, right? I'm not going to belt us yet. But when Sark started playing some really good football and winning some good games his second year, and it was like, oh my God, it was a sigh of relief. It was pressure off us. Like we had gone through, like talk about our college career. When we started, we had Mac Brown, right? Then we went to two more coaches, and then we went to Sark. We've had 4 coaches in the last decade at Texas. That's after Texas had Mac Brown for God knows how long, right? So like you don't want to be a part of that coaching carousel. You don't want to be one of these teams like honestly what Florida has become in recent years where they're just consistently changing clothes, right? It's just too much. So it's really good. It was really big fresh breath of fresh air. It was good to get the monkey off the back and have a coach come in there that we believe in and can see a future with, see the light at the end of the tunnel, come in the third year. And yes, we're going to the SEC. And yes, that is still really exciting. But he comes in this third year when the pressure's on him, when we're talking about the playoffs, and he actually gets there. He actually, at the end of the season, like, think about this. You lose to OU. Texas loses to OU. It's so classic. You beat Alabama in Alabama. Everything is going your way. You're on top of the mountain. And you lose a heartbreaker to OU. Texas of the last decade, what happens? They collapse the rest of the season. Things unravel. They go from a top tier team to all of a sudden making bonehead mistakes. I mean, I've seen the craziest things in Texas football. Punts of 12 yards. Like you miss extra points. Like at the end of the game to tie the thing. Like that kind of thing happens when you lose that one game and you start to unravel. They lose that heartbreaker against OU, right? Our quarterback goes down at a point. We lose our running back, our star running back who could have gotten Heisman votes, who's still going to be the first running back off the board in the NFL draft with a torn ACL. How crazy is that? That's how well he was playing, replacing Bijan Robinson, who was the 8th overall pick. All these things are getting thrown at Sark and the players and the team and the university. And what happens? They hit and they keep moving forward. They get hit and they keep moving forward. This is a completely different thing going on in Texas than we grew accustomed to under Chuck, under Herman, and even under the later years of Mac Brown. Like this is a team that can actually turn around, get things done, to handle adversity. And that is the most energizing thing, not just joining the SEC for the Longhorn Nation.
But and we throughout the entire time last year, and specifically after we lost that Oklahoma game, like you're talking about, Josh.
Yeah,
the Texas football team, they had the excuse, right? They could have at any point said, "We're going to the SEC. It doesn't really matter," right? But I feel like now heading into the SEC, it's almost like they've earned their spot to be here, right? Mm-hmm. And then they're going to have to continue earning their stripes. Again, I do want to just shout out our schedule. Next season, we play 6 games at home. We don't play any back-to-back games on the road. So I think that's something to look for in future years, where if you gotta go to Knoxville and then you gotta go to Gainesville right after that, right? Back-to-back weeks. Like we won't have that challenge in year 1 in the SEC. And I think that makes a huge difference for just, the transition, because with that week of breathing room to get back to Austin, to refresh, to sleep in your own bed, to practice on your field, on your turf, and play someone at home, will make a huge difference. I think mentally, because you're right, Nick, earlier when you bring up like going to the Grove, going to Knoxville, going to, all these different places in the SEC that the fans just get up every single game and make it loud and they make it uncomfortable for the opponent. It's not the same as playing in Manhattan, Kansas, right? Yeah. It's not the same as playing in Lawrence or Waco. It's just, and having to do it back to back is that's when it gets really challenging. So, and,
we're also traveling quite a bit, to the East Coast. We're the furthest, Western team. I mean, the closest game we're going to play is going to be up in Dallas against OU. The closest game that we used to play on our schedule last season was going, an hour up the road to Waco for Baylor. And so they wouldn't even have to hop on a plane. They just take a bus straight up there. Yeah. So I mean, plenty of new challenges coming our way. But Chris, I'm excited to hear like what you have to say as someone that's been involved in the SEC for years, and kind of what your outside perspective is with us coming in, and also with OU coming in too.
I think everybody's pretty excited. It's a weird time, right? Because like you're this bizarro world where everybody's suddenly more even than they've been in a long time. Like you go back, I don't know, late 90s, mid 90s, Tennessee was the team, got a national title, and then it became Florida for a while. And then came Nick Saban and won one at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
Then he hopped out of the league, and then he came to Alabama, and nobody's ever done anything like he's done before.
Yeah.
And in the middle of when he's got it rolling, Kirby Smart jumps up and does his thing. And I mean, I think the thing that people constantly say, and to be honest, there is some SEC snobbery here. Sometimes I think if I have one criticism of the league, it's this idea that nobody else can play football. Well, Michigan, Ohio State, some of those teams are all right at it too. Oklahoma, some of the teams, now you guys obviously, but I think there is something to be said for playing an Alabama and Auburn, a Georgia, even a Kentucky and Ole Miss, a Tennessee week in and week out. You don't get, maybe what a Kansas used to be, except for maybe Vanderbilt. And yet at the same time, the last time we went through this, the weird thing is you got one program in Texas A&M that figured its stock was going to rise by joining the league and it would go to a different level. And Missouri's an afterthought. What happened? No, granted, Georgia and Tennessee were down at that time. Missouri comes in and wins the East the first 2 years. So I don't know what to make of it. But I think the game's more competitive than it's ever been. But I wanted to ask you guys something. And Alex, I'll give you first crack this time. I've got a 10-year-old son who is a just big sports fan. He watches YouTube for highlights, mostly baseball, but he'll watch some college football. And we're just going through one day. He's like, buddy, I'm going to show you the best college football game that I've ever seen. And you probably know where I'm going to go. Texas and Southern Cal. And I always just kind of, always kind of wondered. And I've seen a lot of great football games. I think for my money, that was the most entertaining game I ever remember. Just phenomenal. But I've always kind of wondered, Texas is sitting over there with all the advantages you guys know, but it's never been able to put together an Alabama, Georgia type run. And I've always kind of wondered from the outside, why did that never happen? Because all the resources are there, the passion's there. I think if you'd asked me the night of that game, and I know they had some good seasons afterwards, what's going to happen next? I would have thought Texas would have gotten another one but between now and then. I'm sure this has been a topic before, but I'm just curious what your perspective is, because I don't see it every day, year in and year out, like you guys do.
Before Alex goes, I will say I think we're all going to have different answers here. And it's honestly something we've not really talked about. So I'm excited to hear what we all have to say.
Yeah, I do think, man, that Nick Saban, incredible. What I'm about to say is not taking away from anything that he did as a recruiter, as a coach, what any of those players did on the field. But you also, for a dynasty to occur, you have to have a tremendous amount of luck, and the timing has to be perfect. And I actually think, like, we did make some Big Four bowl games right after we went to the national championship, and we were in a national championship 5 years later against the Alabama Crimson Tide. And if Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt, things are tremendously different in that game. And if Texas ends up winning that national championship, then we've gotten 2 in 5 years, right? Sandwiched in between our 2 championships would have been Urban Meyer's at Florida, right? And then LSU's other championship that they won in that stretch. And I think maybe Mac Brown stays, and there's a little bit more juice for him to stay and to continue coaching, to continue the legacy at Texas. And when that didn't happen, the last 3 years of Mac Brown as a coach, he took his foot off the gas a little bit. I think he had his eyes on retirement and he wanted to step away. But part of it, I think, were because of the circumstances of not winning that national championship. So I think it had a tremendous effect on what could have been for the next 10 years after that 2005 championship against the Trojans. Now, the other thing I'll throw in there, and this popped into my head as you asked us, like, what SEC fans need to know about Texas. Austin is different than any other city in that any of the colleges and universities in the SEC play in, live in. It is one of the largest growing cities, year in, year out. I think it's like up 25% on population growth from 2023 to 2024. And that means that they're bringing in transplants from all over the United States.
And that's every year. That's not just last year. It's
right. Every single year. It's constantly in the top 3 of fastest growing cities in the United States. There's a massive tech scene. There's a massive media scene, entertainment. And so music, live music. Because of that, there's so many distractions that take people away from college football, and people are moving there not to root for the Texas Longhorns. Whereas if you're in Tuscaloosa, the most important thing is Alabama Crimson Tide football, and it will be for the next 10 years. I have no doubt about that. And so you almost have to like teach these new people that are moving to Austin, if they even care about college football, hey, here's what this means for this city. Here's what the Texas Longhorns represent, what the Burnt Orange represents, and why it's important. And they might just say at the end of the day, I don't care. And they'll go, paddle on Lake Austin and live a really, really happy life. So we fight against that. And what Nick was talking about, our season ticket holders and making the environment of the stadium at DKR something for opposing teams to be scared of. It's taken time, and it might've been easier, in 2008, and it's harder to replicate now, not only because it's Austin, but also because it's the social media era of, and less people care about college football, or not less people, but it's harder to get people who don't care about college football to care about college football now. Whereas you might have been able to get a person who likes the NFL and they'll get jazzed up for the second half of the college football season. And maybe now they don't care about it. So it's a lot of different things, but I would say that injury was actually a lot more impactful than people make it out to be for Colt McCoy. That's my answer.
And I'll lead with kind of what Toss was saying about Austin. He's right more than anything. I mean, you come to a place like Los Angeles or New York or wherever, and more likely than not, you're going to meet people who are not from that city. And it's like that a lot from Austin too. There's a lot of people moving there for their jobs, for certain entertainment areas, for tech, whatever it may be, or just to start a new life. And so it's not necessarily like the biggest thing. Whereas in Tuscaloosa, Toss, you said in 10 years, you're confident. I'm confident they're going to be the most important thing in 100 years. Like nothing is changing about Tuscaloosa within the next 100 years. It's always going to be the Tide, and at the end of the day, like if I see someone who's like from Austin that's in LA, or that they've lived in Austin, and I say hook them, odds are like they're not going to say hook them back. They're going to be like, no, like I actually went to Michigan or like I have a friend who went to Michigan who actually lives in Austin. And that's just not the case in the South, I feel like, for a lot of those schools. But that's one thing. I mean, that's one small thing. There's a lot of distractions. It's a big city with a lot of entertainment, a lot of things to do for, kids to kind of focus on other things other than just football. Another thing as well is like, in that era that Mac was, where he probably could have had his success, like that was the era where it's 2 teams and that's it. You have 1 loss on your schedule and it screws up everything, and like, even if you're undefeated, there's no guarantee that you're getting into the big dance because there could be 2 other teams that are undefeated that are ahead of you. I point back to, I mean, yes, Colt McCoy gets injured, but that 2008 season where the 2009 championship, Florida versus Oklahoma, the only reason Oklahoma is in there is because Texas Tech beats Texas on a crazy Hail Mary to Michael Crabtree. And then Oklahoma beats Texas Tech, and then Texas beats Oklahoma. So you had a 3, coin toss, honestly. And Oklahoma's the one that gets in and ultimately loses to the Tebow Florida team, which I bet we put up a bigger fight than that. I mean, this was 24-14, but maybe we don't win. Maybe it's a 3-score, or maybe it's a 3-point game, can't really say there. But that's also something that kind of, it just drives it a little further and further back. But you're right. I mean, with all the talent that Texas has had year in and year out, it's kind of hard to put like a finger on exactly why, they haven't been making it. But a lot of it, I think, at the same time, was the Big 12 just wasn't as strong as the SEC was in those 2000 years as well. You're mentioning Florida had their years, and LSU had their years, and Bama. And it's like really the only team to win a national championship in the Big 12 in the last 20 years has been Texas, and OU's gotten there once. So the end of the day, like I think there was a lot of, especially when there was 2 teams that got in, there was just a lot of bias towards the SEC, and I'm sure we still see that now. They put 2 teams in there this year, and Florida State was pissed off about that, but we've leveled the playing field a lot more now with the 12-team system. So hopefully we don't have those flaws. I mean, someone's going to always be butthurt that they don't make it in, but I think that's the biggest thing. Josh?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, go ahead, Josh.
Well, first I want to, with all due respect, I think I appreciate you saying that the most exciting game you ever saw was ours. But if my memory serves me correctly, Chris, your favorite sports memories of you and your dad at the Music City Miracle. I believe you were there, right?
Yeah. Favorite college football game. So that was
that's
the
a pretty good one, man.
Well, yeah, it was. But I mean, in terms of college football games, I just remember watching that one going, that's the greatest game I've ever seen. Yeah. And if I went back and watched it again,
Longhorn Network, I stop every time.
I mean, you still can remember names, and it was fascinating. You had 2 heavyweight quarterbacks just going at it, and I just remember
running backs.
And you were just enthralled by the whole thing. At the end of it, you were like, I'm exhausted, but like if they played another quarter, I'd sign up for it too.
It's not free football in the league. I mean, Nick's right. Like if they play it on Longhorn Network all the time, it's literally the dark night of college football or sporting events. If it's on, you watch it. Like if you're scrolling through TV and Dark Knight's on, you watch it. If you're scrolling through TV and that game is on, you watch it. I agree with everything the guys are saying. I will say, like, why haven't they done what Saban has done or Smart has done? Not many people have done that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And in order for them to do what they did, no one else can be doing it. So, like, they have to go on those runs. I mean, the Colt McCoy injury is the catalyst for them, and it's like, the downhill for us. After that, we lose. Garrett Gilbert's not good. David Ash, injuries kind of flops. Case, Colt's brother, kind of flops. Like, and then it just becomes a vicious cycle of not getting the quarterback we need in the building, not getting the recruits we need in the building. The SEC getting better and better, and like a lot of teams catching lightning in the bottle. Like Auburn, 1 year caught lightning in the bottle with Cam Newton, had one of the greatest college seasons. Had the greatest college season. Had it not been for LSU a few years later catching lightning in the bottle with Joe Burrow in the greatest college season, like there were Jameis Winston and Florida State pop up. Like there are also teams other than Bama and Georgia who come in and they go and get theirs as well. Saban's a heck of a recruiter. What he did is phenomenal. And it's not every day. Like, and you see that, and it's what separates those guys from everybody else. It's like, it's what separates Michael Jordan and Tom Brady, right? And Bill Belichick and Mahomes is trying, like LeBron was trying to catch MJ and even Kobe. Like they're trying to catch them, but they're always in sports have to be those people in the upper echelon, like Coach K, like Wooden, like these guys. There are Saban's in that realm, and it's a blessing we even got to see him. It's unfortunate that we were, again on the losing hand of like his jump start at Alabama. But it happens, and it's an amazing thing objectively that we got to witness in sports. And I would say like a lot of unfortunate, players not panning out. I think the wrong coaches in the building, with Strong and Herman, I think, and a lot of the players love Chuck, and a lot of the people around, the former players, love Chuck, but it didn't work out. And he can, for one reason or another, he couldn't handle it. And his coaching career tailspinned. Herman came in and was doing had the hype of Sark almost, and then did all the wrong things.
Players hate him.
So it's a real series of unfortunate events that we endured. And it's a real series of like, we went from Vince Young to Colt McCoy. Like you also don't get that all the time. That's amazing. Like how often are college programs going from Vince Young, who we want to talk about the best, you're talking about heavyweights. Like we're mentioning him with Tebow, Leinart, Newton, Burrow as like one of the best college, if not the best college quarterback of all time. And the fact that we went from Vince Young to a guy who broke records at Texas and holds records at Texas. And we had him on our show, Chris, and I was reading his accolades, and I literally could have been there all day. I was introducing Khaleesi in Game of Thrones. Like it was like a laundry list of things that this guy had done in college football. He was that accomplished. So it's a blessing that we got to go from that to that. But what Alabama has done and what Saban did, like he went from quarterback to quarterback to quarterback to quarterback, and he built something And he almost set the stage of how you have to do it. Like, you want to compete with me, you better have a third string that could come in there, a guy like the third quarterback in the room, Mac Jones, who could be a first round pick. Because if you don't have that, you're not getting past me, man. And he has set the tone for the new age of college football. And Nick's point of, like, back in the day, it's you lose one game, you're done. You lose one game, or if, like he said, you don't lose any, and you're reeling, man, and you're in trouble. So a lot of factors in there, a lot of greatness that we are weren't able to obtain. Those are the reasons. And yeah.
I think the one thing I'll just quickly add on to that is I mentioned at the beginning of my answer about how things have to perfectly align for you to have that dynasty. You can get really unlucky too, or other teams can take advantage of, an injury. Colt goes down, then Mac only has 3 more seasons coaching with the Longhorns. And then Josh just mentioned, like, at that point when we brought in Chuck and then we brought in Herman, it was the university, the coach, the AD, they were not all aligned in either one of those scenarios. And at the same time, Art Briles is doing really, really important things recruiting wise for the Baylor Bears. Gary Patterson is doing great things recruiting to nab some of those Texas guys that used to always go to the University of Texas. A&M is doing some really important things recruiting to take talent away from the Texas Longhorns and to bolster their universities programs in Waco, in Fort Worth, and in College Station. And it had a huge and not to mention Stoops is there doing his thing at the same time.
Great coaching,
yeah,
man.
right.
Like, they had a great coach. Like, Art Briles was a great coach, man. Like, they had some really good. Gary Patterson, like, is amazing. Honestly, like, Gary Patterson's an unsung
Mike
hero in our
Leach had a
eyes.
spell. Yeah, you guys had some dudes in the league. That's true. Yeah.
We're tough, man. That just like, and you know what? What was Nick said at the top of the show? Target on our back. The target on our back was probably bigger.
Yeah, still kids from Texas, still recruits.
Beat Texas. Texas. Like, that's it, man. We saw Baker Mayfield, who is just a lovable dickhead at Super Bowl.
Yeah, Radio Row.
And, like, wouldn't like, and look, man, like, and we're not like beggars and like that. And we were like, just dude, come talk some Texas with us. He goes, why would I do that? I hate you guys. People hate Texas. And he kicked the shit out of us. I'm sorry, I don't know if I could curse on here, but it's just the truth. Like, he kicked our ass every year, pretty much.
Yeah.
Hate it, man.
Well, two things I do. And we're gonna talk law offense and defense before we're done here, because I want to focus. But it's interesting because I've always kind of wondered. I do think that the one bad break or the whatever, people underestimate that in sports. An injury here or there, we can name a million things. I do believe in that. The other thing, it is interesting. This hadn't really occurred to me until just now, but I'm guessing just about everywhere Texas is. Like in Austin, there's other stuff to do besides Texas. Maybe it is or isn't the biggest thing in town. I mean, I live in Nashville, where there's an SEC school, Vanderbilt, and it's the same thing there, although it's much, much different. There's just other stuff for people to do. There's music. I mean, Nashville and Austin, I've only spent a little bit of time in Austin, but I think it's very similar to Nashville in a lot of ways. And so this will be the first time you guys are in a league maybe where there's actually something a little bigger going on, and you won't be the only city like that. There's one exception in this league where maybe the SEC football team is not the biggest thing in town, and that's Lexington, because the basketball team is the biggest thing in town, and maybe horse racing too. But it is, I mean, you'll at least have one other team in the league that shares that, although Vanderbilt and Texas miles apart. But
yeah, no, I think it's funny, but bachelorette parties, like, both are like very,
music cities.
very, very exciting destinations for that.
Show you a folder in my phone where I have literally over 140 photos of different brides in my college career. Like that I'm gonna play at my wedding, and like of all these brides I could have had.
And I can tell you on their itinerary for the weekend, any one of those brides, Josh, or the ones that are going to Nashville, it's never go see a Vanderbilt football game. That's never on the itinerary.
Unless it's an Auburn fan or an Alabama or fan or something like that. But yes,
right.
It's same thing, although again, very different variety. But
so